All right, everyone, good morning. I'm going to get started. Thank you all for joining us today as we talk about the value of collaboration. I'm Caitlin McLean. I'm an Associate Director at the Milken Institute. And I'm joined today by a fabulous group of panelists. Their bios are all in the program, so we won't go into extensive intros, but we'll give a brief round. All the way to my left, we have Steve Woodhead from Chevron. We have Carrie Stever from Eris. We have Natalie Ravel from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have Efrat Peled from Arison Investments. And all the way at the end, last but not least, Rick Leach from World Food Program USA. And so today what we're talking about is the concept of the public-private partnership. And obviously that can mean a variety of different things to a variety of different stakeholders. And increasingly, as public sector budgets are decreasing, there is this increased need to partner with the private sector. But again, if you're looking at infrastructure, that can mean one type of partnership. If you're looking at energy or health or water, that can mean something entirely different. And so what we hope to do today is really talk about the different potential models. And obviously, for those of you in the audience who are already working in public-private partnerships or who are interested in collaborating with different types of organizations, there's always somewhat of a hesitation about what is this really going to look like? What do I have to do to really understand the structure of these models? So today we're going to see a few different models, I think, that will be helpful to kind of demystify this public-private partnership idea. So Carrie, why don't we start with you? Because Eris is obviously a public-private partnership. And so why don't you talk a little bit about how you're structured and how you were able to create the structure and understand, how you needed to get the most out of each person's value in the partnership.
Yeah. So our model, we're developing new tuberculosis vaccines, and there isn't anything that we do that doesn't involve a partner. So from how we source intellectual property to how we advance it through the pipeline to finance, it always involves others. And so we sort of play this, bring capital, bring good technical experience to the field and then help advance it. So, I can tell you how many hundreds of contracts we sign a year just to get the partnerships on the way. It's very difficult. But at the same time, I think it's about maximizing returns on both sides. So one thing, Caitlin, that we've done over the last 2 years is we did the first sort of market analysis for new TB vaccines, and where everybody thought, well, this is a disease of poverty, so there's no real market. Well, guess what? There is a market. It's in the billions of dollars, actually. And so once we were able to generate that data and go on, show it to our partners in the field, all of a sudden there was this renewed interest in investing in TB vaccines. So I think that a lot of it is providing the thought leadership and also just bringing the right people to the table and having technical experience, but also just, I would say for us, and particularly with the Gates Foundation money that we have, bringing capital into the field really makes a huge difference. And then we can take it from there.
Right. So Steve, to pick up on something that Carrie had said, it's really about maximizing the return for all parties involved. So why is this important to Chevron? Talk a little bit about the partnerships that you've engaged in.
Well, first of all, the partnership, the public-private partnership model is important to us because, while we have tremendous resources that we can bring to bear, we don't necessarily have the organizational capacity to execute against our social investment and corporate responsibility goals. So some of the models that have worked well for us, I guess the most recent example, we announced last week a $30 million commitment to STEM education in the U.S. And that commitment is based on partnerships with are based on a model that where we're going to go after advocacy and leadership, teacher training, programmatic infrastructure for students, and research all around STEM education. And we're partnering with 4 different partners who all bring something level of expertise in each one of those areas.
So unpack a little bit, so those 4 partners, do you have a certain criteria, depending on the project, obviously, of how you were able to sort through the many organizations that work in that field and pick those 4 partners?
Yeah, well, the part of the criteria was just knowing what we wanted to accomplish and finding somebody who was well established. Say, for instance, we wanted to get behind the next generation science standards, so we approached Achieve. It's the organization that is leading the grassroots effort behind advocacy around next generation science standards. From a programmatic classroom perspective, Project Lead the Way is the leader in that space. So, and we had already been engaged with them, but we beefed up our partnership. From a curriculum development perspective, we've worked to form an expert working group within the National Academy of Engineering. So it wasn't necessarily seeking out or filtering through. It was more of a seeking out and identifying who the leaders are in the space for us.
Right. And so Natalie, I think you probably, from the Gates Foundation perspective, share similar comments with Steve about why this is important for the Gates Foundation, how you partner with people to kind of maximize and leverage your skills, but also the skill sets of the people that you're partnering with.
Exactly. I mean, public-private partnerships are fundamentally important to the foundation because they work. And they work in a way that creates a structure and a set of solutions that are sustainable and scalable. And the key to making them work is to exactly kind of leverage the strengths that both Carrie and Steve have talked about. And I kind of want to make it a little bit more real through a story. So our target population is obviously, you think about the poorest in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. If you imagine a young mom who's just given birth and her baby, the baby needs vaccines. The mother needs family planning until and when she wants more children. But if you think about from a corporation, how do I get services to that woman? She's obviously very poor. Margins are slim. Any business model is going to have to rely on volume. The infrastructure and the cold chain to kind of just get to that woman is complex and difficult to navigate. The procurement itself, who am I selling to? Am I selling to the NGO or the government or one of the donors that's buying on behalf of this woman? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to pay for it? Is there money? That creates risk all along the value chain for a private sector. So they may want to actually invest and service this target population, but how? And that's kind of where Carrie's point around what does the public sector bring? They bring a deep knowledge about this population. The foundations and the donors bring very flexible funding and a long-term perspective. Because it's going to take a while to get to a sustainable business model. But you need the innovation, the scale, business models, the low-cost manufacturing expertise from private sector, and you marry it with the expertise of the public sector and the flexible funding and the flexible risk positions. And I think that gets you to a model that doesn't depend, doesn't create long-term dependencies on aid. So, that's why for us, like the public-private partnerships kind of tick all the check marks for the kind of solutions we want to have.
And I would imagine that it's also about, the volume guarantees that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
So they're more of a market-based solution, but they also complement the work of your grantees.
Correct.
So some of the work of the people who are just getting grants that are, that's non-recoverable funding, but this type of program-related investment kind of complements that work as well to kind of double the impact for the foundation.
Exactly. So a volume guarantee is actually a very basic contracting term. I mean, it's a multi-year purchase contract. But all of the risks that I just highlighted there, it creates risk premiums within a business model, and that usually translates to higher prices. So a volume guarantee, all we're telling the supplier is, we're going to buy a certain amount from you over the course of time. What are the things that create costs? How can we reduce that? One of them is reducing risk premiums. That allows the company to service that target population at a much lower cost. It allows them to build capacity to service this population. And frankly, if we guess right, because we as a foundation know the donors, we know the public sector and the NGOs that are going to fund and deliver this, it's actually a cheaper risk for us to price and to bear. And so, if we do it right, we don't actually have to pay anything out. The donor agencies or whoever is the end buyer is going to buy it anyway, and they're going to achieve and share with the private sector the cost savings we created by reducing the risks of doing business with the poorest populations.
Right. And so Efrat, so as the investor on the panel, obviously you deal with risk every day in terms of assessing your potential investments and looking at your current portfolio. So, and you're going into markets, developed countries and developing countries, looking, for example, at your water business. Obviously, you then do actually end up partnering with the public sector. So how do you kind of structure those partnerships to ensure that you are minimizing your risk?
Okay. I think I will start by explaining that I'm sitting in a different role than I guess most panelists here, and I'm sitting on the investor, as you said, on the investor and business side. At the Harrison Group, we have our foundation that is very active, but we have a leading investment group. It's a privately held group. Investing in infrastructure, real estate, banking, water for many, many years now. For us, the private-public partnership is the way we do business. And we are headquartered in Israel, but we operate in 40 countries around the world. As you said, in the developed countries, but also in Africa, in Central America, in Eastern Europe, so many, many countries around the world. I think the basic idea comes from the fact that there's plenty of knowledge that in our DNA, in the company's DNA, probably because the headquarters is in Israel for many long time. We needed to build the country. We didn't have any natural resources, so we needed to collaborate and we needed to innovate. And around this topic, we leveraged the capability over many, many years. And for us, partnering is usually at level of government and level of municipals. On large-scale infrastructure project, water project, energy project. Our mindset as an investment group is that you can do very, very positive thing and you can do good thing through business. It's not only the philanthropic side that can, influence the world in a positive way. We carry a totally different vision based on the owner of the group. And we elaborate that. We enhance that in our partnership. The only way that we can accomplish large-scale project in countries is to collaborate. Usually, typical project will bring the need from the country, from the government who needs a project, a bridge, a road. It can be in Africa. It can be any place in the world. And then you need to arrange the financing, and that's where a lot of time the multilateral agencies are coming into place and acting as the finance side. And then the capability, the construction capability and the execution capability is coming from the private sector. This collaboration creates custom made projects. These are not, you hardly see a project that you do in a country. If you build a hydroelectric facility in Guatemala, it's totally different than a different hydroelectric facility in Ethiopia. You need to really listen to the need of the people in order to make it sustainable. Now, another point is that when you come to this kind of partnership, you are playing a very long-term play because you're obliged to a 20, 15, 25-year project, and you need to make sure it is profitable. And everybody, as I think somebody said here, is winning out of this project. We feel it's a strange thing to say that it's sometimes even easier to work, going back to your question, in the developing countries because of the need, because of the lack of resource. They need to come with more innovation to these projects, so they are more open to embrace partnership, and they are more open to learn than what you see a lot of time in developed countries.
Yeah, no, I think that It's a great point, I think, because again, as we started this conversation talking about the different shapes and forms that these types of models can take, and clearly your models are much more for-profit, obviously, but we also have Rick at the end with the World Food Program, who, obviously delivering, the most food aid throughout the world. Obviously you have to come at your private sector partners with different types of value that you're offering them than a financial value necessarily. So how do you pick your partners, and why do they come to WFP USA?
Well, first, and thank you for the Milken Institute's continued commitment to these public-private partnerships. First, I think it's helpful to understand who's the World Food Program, since most of you probably never heard of the World Food Program. It is, in fact, the largest humanitarian organization in the world. Feeds 90 million people each year in over 80 countries, and that plays the lead role in every emergency operation around the world, whether it be feeding 3 million people inside Syria, actually up to almost 4 million now, 2 to 3 million refugees, earthquake in Haiti, typhoon in the Philippines. The World Food Program is the first in, runs the food security, logistics, and communication hub for the entire humanitarian community. But it's not just emergencies, it's also looking at response in a comprehensive way to food insecurity. So that's everything from an exciting project launch with Gates Foundation, which looked to actually create the capacity of small-scale farmers who actually make up half the people who suffer from hunger in the world to actually sell to us. So increasing their productivity and their capacity to sell. So we buy food from hungry people to feed hungry people, and in the process lift the first group out of hunger and poverty. A brilliant idea, Bill Gates' idea. So that's a very successful partnership. He's been somewhat successful, I think, in his life. But and also efforts in a very targeted way around nutrition, especially in the first 1,000 days, which is that period between pregnancy and age 2, where malnutrition will result in lifetime development problems. So $1 invested in proper nutrition that period is equal to about $138 in terms of increased productivity, healthcare, and so on. So World Food Program is involved in a very comprehensive way across many countries to try and address food insecurity. So we're there, we're on the ground, and why are we an attractive partner, and what are the types of partnerships? I'll just list 3 reasons why companies from a business standpoint partner with us. One is branding. Obviously, consumers purchase products from companies they like and that are affiliated with social causes they believe in. So that's one reason. We work with a lot of companies in cause-related marketing. Second is employee morale and retention. Individuals like to work for companies they believe in. Profit is not the sole motivating factor for employees or for CEOs. So that's another reason why companies partner with us. A third is market entry. I mean, in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, a lot of the countries we're in, the World Food Program is very well known. If you're in a vehicle with a logo on the door, people stop and wave. It's an incredible thing. No one in this country's heard of it because we don't work in developed countries, but around the world we work directly with governments and people know who we are. New companies coming into markets, new countries, similarly governments and people know when companies are coming in and they watch them carefully. So we partner with a lot of companies who are looking to get into markets, and it's a nice way to come into a market by funding an effort to decrease child malnutrition. But I think it's an important point that CEOs of companies, just like individuals, care. So the decisions being made oftentimes are not based solely on business, but because people care. And I'll give you one example. David Novak, who's CEO of a company called Yum Brands, which is the largest restaurant company in the world. It's KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. They've been a partner of ours for many years, generated over $150 million over the last few years for school feeding programs. It is a consumer-driven point-of-sale operation. The foundation is involved. But the perk that David gives to his senior team, he takes them on a trip to see the food relief operations. The franchises all compete to participate. So it's not just about branding and about employee retention, it's also about who they are as a company. So and I'll tell you one other story. I met with a fellow named Feike who runs a company called DSM, one of the largest life science companies in the world. And I said, Feike, why do you do this? You know, a big partner of ours, helps produce nutrition products, high nutrition products. He said, you know, when I go home and my son asks me, hey, what'd you do today, Dad? And I talked about stock prices. He said, so what did you do today? He said, I'd like to talk about our partnership with you guys. So there are business reasons. We can talk about some of the challenges, but it is a win for the people being served and for the companies.
So let's touch on the challenges then, since you brought that up, because obviously, as we've talked about, the basis of this panel has been, a lot of the conversations that we've had with some of our network from the private side, really asking about what do you really mean when you talk about public-private partnership, and it seems like they're risky. It seems like there could be too much of a transaction cost. I don't know if I have the human capital to really pull this off. So Steve, from Chevron's point of view, how have you guys been able to really do this cost-benefit analysis in terms of who you're partnering with and how you get around some of those perceived challenges?
Well, I sort of read that as a two-part question. One, the challenges, and then the sort of the evaluation metrics associated with the partnerships. Aside from the desired social benefits and positive end impact of any partnership, the M&E monitoring evaluation is sort of the holy grail right now. And if anybody's figured that out, let us know. We're embarking on a pretty robust system internally. We have a web-based platform, and we're trying to get all of our colleagues globally to enter an awful lot of data that we can look at. I think we look at it from two different perspectives. We have business goals and social goals. So our business metrics are things like being viewed as a partner of choice, establishing a strong reputation as a leader in corporate responsibility. We don't like to use the term license to operate, but we want to be viewed as a long-term partner who invests in the communities, because we feel like the communities, when they succeed, we succeed in areas we operate in. Social goals are largely numbers-based. How many students did we reach? How many, things that are tangible that we can, not on a cost per dollar basis, but just something that we can quantify. How many teachers were trained? How many students were engaged in the program? How many mothers and children in West Africa were tested for HIV? How many cases? How many cases of HIV? How many cases of mother-to-child transmission of HIV have we reduced? So we have those hard number facts.
And you design, sorry, just to jump in 1 second, and you design those with your partners, correct? In terms of what kind of impacts you're looking for?
Yeah, we have a set of criteria that we have standardized in-house, and then we'll apply that to each partnership and massage it,
Based
accordingly.
on the partnership.
Yeah, because we realize that some programs just don't necessarily fit into that mold.
Right.
From a challenge perspective, I think for a company like Chevron, we were the third largest corporate donor in 2012 globally, and we spent a little more than that in 2013. So I suspect when the numbers come out, we'll be up there again. And I think a lot of it is the avoiding the perceptions that we're big oil and we're trying to just throw money around. That's not the case. We, as a percentage of profits, we donated half of what the average company that makes $10 billion or more donated, but we donated twice as much.
Wow.
Right. So you can't look at it on a linear basis, right? That's just unsustainable. But we do deal with those perceptions, and so there are challenges in that regard. And so having the public-private partnerships really helps us from a credibility standpoint, right? That we have partners of choice. We recognize our interdependence with the public sector, and our best partnerships are with those who also recognize interdependence with the private sector.
Right.
So, and the other challenges are focus for us. Personally, I have an 80-20 rule, or else I would be in an insane asylum right now. But if we can get to 80% on our strategic themes of health, education, and economic development, then I consider that a success. But we spend a lot of time fielding requests and opportunities, as I like to refer to them, because I think they all are opportunities. And staying on focus, because there are a lot of things that we could help with, but we feel that we can have the most impact if we operate on those 3 areas in the areas that we operate in.
Right. And so, Natalie, at the Gates Foundation, I think that you guys have done a really great job of bridging that language gap, as we've been talking about, between the public and the private sector. And obviously, you guys have deep content expertise with your program officers and on the content side. So, how do you guys, when you look at a new potential volume guarantee or something like that, what challenges have you come across in terms of trying to build those partnerships, and how do you kind of work around them?
Yep. So I feel like at the foundation we're a little bit of translators and therapists. And a lot of the success and the same are the challenges is really changing the body language and the attitude of both the public sector and the private sector partners coming into the partnership. So from the private sector, I think, no disrespect to Steve, but I would like to move our partnerships out of the corporate social responsibility to prove to them that this partnership can actually be a profitable venture. The reason is so it can be sustainable. Corporate social responsibility is great, but it's not dependable, reliable in the same amounts every year. And so what we have to work with the companies on really is thinking about their business model a different way. So it's not going to be a lot of profits on small volumes. We're talking about lower profits per unit, but a lot more units. So you get to the same level, you're just servicing a larger population with it. And so that's kind of one piece of it. And then on the public sector side, I think the biggest thing is to say that profit isn't a bad word. It's not a dirty term. It's a way to make the program sustainable and scalable. And so that distrust of profits and the motives of business partners, that's kind of a little bit of where the therapist / translator comes into play, which is, if we can work with the private sector partners, see what drives their costs, help reduce the costs, and then share in those cost savings, that's what makes it sustainable. And that is, if it's sustainable, companies will keep doing it, and it makes the venture, self-sufficient and reliable. So I think, that's the challenge is shifting mindsets, and the way we do it is, very frankly, just doing a partnership, bringing others to the table, letting them see a little bit of the success of prices coming down, the women and the babies kind of getting access to the product for the first time, and kind of just proving little by little that they work.
Right. So you brought up a good point, Rick. I don't know if you have some thoughts about this, but certainly on the public sector side, and for food and nutrition in particular, partnering with the private sector can sort of be a kind of dirty proposition, and depending on who you're working with. And certainly actually in health as well, depending on who you're trying to target, if you're looking at extractive industries or other companies, so jump in, Carrie, as well. There is this reputational, perhaps, risk. Is that a challenge that you see as you guys assess these potential partnerships?
I don't really look at it as a challenge, and maybe my background as a corporate lawyer has an impact on that, but I personally think it's a pleasure to hear the comments. I mean, in some respects, if there's economic development, then we're addressing extreme poverty. And we'd all like to be worked out of business. I know I would love to say we are solved hunger, and I'm now going to look at doing something else. So I do think that, and this is part of the challenge and the opportunity, you need to really understand each other. That's the challenge and the opportunity, is we need to get beyond profits bad and it's all CSR to what is the interest of the business, what's the interest of the public sector entity, and how do we align the two? And for me, the biggest challenge is, and a success for me is, we are not just CSR, we're dealing with the corporate and also the foundation. So that's a success to me, is that we are really across the entire company. And in that regard, I think the huge challenge is, how do we align specifically with the core business of a company? Because a lot of companies don't want to just write a check. They want to be involved with what they do as part of the core business. And so that requires a lot of work up front to understand each other well. And if I can, I just would like to highlight where it's worked, and really exciting examples of where it's worked well. One is a partner, UPS, who you've heard of, those brown trucks everywhere. That actually started as a guy riding a bicycle in Seattle, I learned. But UPS is a strong partner, and what does UPS do for us? They've actually helped enhance our entire logistics operation. So when you're looking at tracking different products, difficult products, running warehouse operations, airport operations, so they've helped from a technical assistance standpoint. They also, in emergency context, give us planes. So we had, after the typhoon hit the Philippines, we had some high energy biscuits in Abu Dhabi. We needed to move to the Philippines. We had planes literally within 30 minutes that they gave us. So that's a partnership, and they also give us funds to fund some of our operations, and they give us staff and warehouse, so it worked. Another one that's very exciting, I'll just briefly mention, is MasterCard. Everyone knows what MasterCard is. What we did with MasterCard is incredible, and it's transforming food assistance in some respects. You followed all the refugees leaving Syria. We have now 1/3 of the population of Lebanon are Syrian refugees. We're feeding about 1 million people in Lebanon and some in Jordan now with a MasterCard type product that they designed with us. So instead of bringing food in, we give them a card that is electronically. We can put about $29 a week on that card. They can access local markets, buy food from local markets with a MasterCard type product that we developed together. So it can work. These are challenges though. They take a long time to understand each other, but I think the benefits are obvious in terms of the impact.
And certainly for MasterCard looking at, that's much more in line with what their business model is.
Yes.
So to really trying to tap into that is great. Carrie, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, kind of how you partner with private sector that may not have, that you might not be as immediately recognizably aligned with what you're doing, but who could really value from the partnership.
Sure. Well, we don't actually plan to commercialize products, so we play a really important role in the translational space of science. So we need industry at their best, right, commercializing and taking products globally. So what we have to partner with industry, and it's not a, I wouldn't say we're in the evil sector, but pharma is not always referred to as the the great. We need their skills and capabilities, and they're very good at what they do. And so we negotiate with them on what we call global access clauses. So we have to ensure that the products that we help support to develop are going to be affordable to those who need it, and then we want them to maximize their returns. So we are looking at a very much a win-win situation where we can incentivize them in their core business, at the same time try to deliver on the global health piece.
And so have you found that that's a benefit because perhaps they don't have the nice fluffy reputation, that's also a benefit to them as well in terms of partnering with you?
It is. It's hard too. Like a classic example, we wanted to do a big trial in India, and we had to pull out because the media was so unfriendly to industry in India, and the regulatory environment was such that this was a place that really needs to be doing TB vaccine work, and we can't. We can't because of the challenges that are basically industry related, and we can't navigate around that, so we have to go other places. But it's again, I think that we do see these partnerships as being, and Sanofi's here and one of our key partners and one of our vaccines that we're working on. We approach the problem and the solutions together, and that's everything from the technical to the finance to everything. And we might have a different vision for the world, but I think there is that win-win that we're striving for.
Right. And I think that, Efrat, you can probably talk to some of the challenges of being on the other side and working with the public sector. Certainly differences in kind of time horizons and the bureaucracy around that, and obviously working in water in particular is very much municipal, local, and you're dealing with different levels of government as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges you've seen?
Yes. I will take it one step further, and I will be a bit more straightforward on the fact that I do believe that the only way to succeed in resolving human issues and real, the large-scale problem of society and communities is if you create these sustainable economic models to resolve it long-term. And that's why I relate so much to what was said here. I was sitting in between and smiling. Because I think the ability of corporation today to come and resolve the topic and the burning issues. The middle class is growing. Urbanization is a big issue, and the capability of creating and understanding that the private sector, if you create the right economic model for that, can really resolve these problems. And I will give an immediate example. We work in the water area, and we're the leading group today in the world in reducing water leakage in pipes. Basically, we go into urban areas, cities. The numbers are enormous. It can go between 40 to 70% of the best quality water in cities are leaking from the pipes, and people are not being served with fresh water in cities all around the world. Developing countries, developed countries, third world countries, doesn't matter, everywhere. Now, we know it's a #1 problem all over the world, and we know that in many of the developing countries, you have a lot of side effects coming out of that. A lot of NGOs are dealing with educational issues that are connected to water issues, because if people are not connected to water, or health issues that are connected to water, and sanitary issues. We created a very innovative way of dealing with these topics in a fast way, and we collaborate. For example, in Manila, we entered a project which was the leading in the world at that time. The city of Manila, the area that we handled, had 9 million people. They suffered from more than 60% of water leakage. They could serve only 6 million people. So you have 3 million people who doesn't have the tap water, although the infrastructure is there, but they just don't have enough. One solution would be to desalinate more water, but then you needed to build somewhere between 6 to 9 desalination facility. I don't want to talk about how long it will take and how much money we're talking about. We entered that project, and within 5 years, we reduced the numbers to around 35% of leakage, which is still a lot. But now they're actually producing less water into the system, and they're serving all the people that I was talking about. So we managed to resolve issues probably around health, around sanitation, that lots of NGOs are dealing with. We managed to even create 450 water engineering position to people. So it's job creation. So we assist for the public sector. We assist on the social security element and all of these topics. I think if you build this thing and you understand that we need to, as a corporation, we need to make profit. By the way, our investors a lot of time are the pension funds in these companies. So it's kind of like the public also benefited the layer of the shareholder. Right. It's kind of like a win-win, but this is the major challenge that I see, that corporations are still being considered as you're here just for the greed. And actually the world have transformed dramatically, and we need the NGO to create the ability to perform and to raise the topic and to raise the issue towards the government and to ask them resolve the problem. But we do need them not to object. What happened a lot of time, activism is bringing to the table people who are actually objecting to economic solutions, and that's where you kind of like get, so what are we, what are you talking about? This is how you build a sustainable economic model and growth. So that's where I see the challenge today.
And I think, Arison is certainly a leader in that space, and because you're not talking about philanthropy, you're talking about your investments.
Business.
And so, there's a lot of people who use the term impact investing or social investing, and certainly there's a little bit of a stigma attached to that about you're not getting the returns that, you're kind of taking concessionary returns, and why would our shareholders want us to be doing that? But clearly you guys have been extremely successful, and you have pension fund, clients that's very interesting in terms of understanding that is a possible, business model for you, which is great.
Yeah, this is interesting because we are in a business of, we've been, I've been the chairman and CEO for the last 8 years. And we, when I entered, we had to transform a lot of the current businesses that on our platform, and to transform them to that kind of mode and mindset, and create the business model of partnering, of having, of of dealing with efficiency as a business model, and long-term horizon, which is also something that is unusual, or it's an uncommon conversation of how you create really long-term returns. One thing we see is that in the area of resolving large-scale infrastructure projects and problem, you see the NGOs, and then on the other side you see funding coming from private equity groups. A lot of the financial institutions or the institutional investors are looking for the private equity to do this kind of investment for the funds they are managing, but then they're looking for very, very high returns that will not exist in that gap. And if you cross through directly to the corporation who work in these fields and work with them and invest with them on finding the solution, you can create very nice, I would say, low to double-digit returns on the funds, but they're very, very sustainable. So you have long-term sustainable, and with lower risk, to be honest, because when you work with the private, with the public, and with governments, and you're aligned with society, that's how you lower risk. We work in Guatemala. We build a lot of roads. The number one problem we needed to approach there when we build the roads and we connect areas, rural areas that were not connected to roads in any way, and we build it in a sustainable way. We care about the environment. But the number one problem, environmental problem for them, is actually educating the kids how to cross these roads, and the people, the population. So this is how you communicate. If you don't do that in the right way, but if you do it in the right way, you reduce risk long-term, you create very profitable long-term returns, and it's a straightforward business model. There's no conflict. Actually, it actually work with one another.
We need
It's
you
kind
to
of
come
like
to every conference that we have and
Be
say
happy.
that and demystify that exactly. So Steve, because I don't want to just talk about challenges. Obviously, you guys have had a lot of success in your partnerships. Do you want to give one or two examples about some of the kind of key successes, key wins that you've had?
Sure. But I did think of one challenge that
Okay.
I wanted to bring up.
Start with that, and then
Yeah,
go to the positive
You know,
side.
I was the first one that had to address challenges, so I get one revisit. You know, we don't have the metrics of profit or anything on our social investments, we don't like to use the word philanthropy, even though our company, all the way back to Rockefeller, has a strong reputation in philanthropy, but we've gone away from that. But we don't have, again, strong financial metrics around our social investments. A lot of it is reputational. And recently, I was contacted by a community college district about some support. And you know, we pride ourselves in looking deeply into every request. So while I was online reading the request, I went on to their website and stumbled across a proclamation that was a month old, whereby they had publicly announced that they were divesting of all fossil fuel companies. So it's
choice,
a left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing
exactly,
thing.
yeah.
But you know, we're human beings, right? You know, how are we supposed to take that?
Right.
So in my role in our company, that's a huge challenge.
Right.
You know, we
Fair
have
enough.
Bono saying, "I applaud what Chevron does, but get your foot off the neck of the people." Thanks for the
Thanks.
compliment.
Yeah, the backhanded compliment. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
So that's a challenge for us.
Right.
Okay, so successes. Thanks. Lift myself up
Tell
here
Bono
now.
you have
Yeah.
some successes. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
You know, I would say we've had tremendous success. We have our Niger Delta Partnership initiative in Nigeria, where 5 years ago we committed $50 million to form a foundation that supports programs that are driven by the community, driven and governed by the community. There's a council set up. So to the point of finding out what the community needs and being driven by that. And one of the things that we consider very successful with that is our ability, the convening capacity that we brought to it, and all the additional funding we brought to this foundation, including $25 million from USAID. So, we consider whenever we can bring our global presence and stature to bear in terms of convening and bringing in partners as a huge success. And on a much smaller scale, it's still in the press room, but we've recently partnered with the San Francisco 49ers, and they have a foundation. And they're moving to Silicon Valley from San Francisco, and they have a new stadium, and they're establishing their presence there. Their foundation is very focused on STEM education. So coincidentally, we are too. We have some relationships with them through other business. So I was hooked up with their foundation. And one of the things that I found very attractive about a partnership with them is we bring about 3 years of experience in the STEM space. Well, we bring hundreds of years of experience in the STEM space, but 3 years in the social investment part of it. And so we have a little bit of a leg up in understanding what partners are out there, what programs are effective. But they're the 49ers, right? And their program is designed to bring classrooms into the stadium with the appeal of going to a stadium and in the middle of the week and learning about seeing their practice facility and everything, but all of a sudden then they get swept into this classroom and learn about STEM, right? So it's using the appeal of the 49ers and the programs that we're developing with them are the science behind the helmet, the science behind what makes a kick or a spiral happen, right? And so things, tying those things to get kids interested and understand the physics and the science behind these things. And along similar lines, the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., they're embarking on a project where they're trying to tie art, or not trying to, they're very effective in tying art to math and teaching kids about the linkage, right? Yeah. And all the mathematical elements that they can see in art, right? So if we can get students who are interested in art to get immersed in science, then we consider that a success too. So much smaller scale, but little victories.
No, but and a very interesting variety of programs that seem to complement each other as well. Carrie, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about success as well and what that means for ARIS.
Well, success for us is having a robust pipeline of good science. So how we go about facilitating that is, again, through technical expertise in finance. We're probably a decade away from having a new vaccine, but I think that we are plowing forward and feel very positive that together with our partnerships we'll get there. And again, I don't know how much anybody in the crowd knows about TB, but it's still here. It's still a big issue, and it's drug resistant and scary. And we don't really have good ways to protect ourselves from that disease. So we're trying to push that science ahead as fast as we can. And I think the success really is, one, I would say, working with the European Investment Bank and the European Commission for the last 2 years on a business model, which really lays the foundation for a real market opportunity. And that's just going to bring the capital and the expertise we need in to get the job done. I think that's been probably one of the big successes that we've had.
You want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about kind of how you even thought to look towards an EIB as a potential partner, because clearly as a nonprofit, you're kind of looking at what types of capital can I attempt to attract, and another nonprofit might not think, oh, the European Investment Bank, that's someone that I should go after and talk to. So how did you guys even kind of come up with that strategy in the first place?
I think it was, I have some work in private equity and emerging markets, and one of the things I did when I first joined ARIS was I looked at the epidemiology of the disease and I said, well, wait, we have all the BRICS and, Europe, which is paying a hefty toll for this disease, and how can we not have a market? Like we're, really just doing the analysis. And so we partnered with KPMG and World Health Organization. We built this robust model that looked at 192 countries. We looked at the disease burden in those countries, and we did tiered pricing with very conservative estimates. And we said, wow, there actually is a market here. And then you can go to a finance institution like the European Investment Bank and say, would you help us de-risk this? Right. So it's a balance of risk reward in the way that you approach the finance. And I think that they have brought partners like the Commission and the European Investment Bank have convened a whole different set of actors that we normally would not have at the table in a philanthropic sense. So I think sometimes you just have to think outside the box and say, whether it's food or water or whatever it is, who's paying the price for the wrong, who's paying the price for the problem? And where are the economic opportunities and trying to solve some of those? And there are some real economic opportunities, and we should exploit those.
No, exactly. So Natalie, in terms of exploiting economic opportunities, where is the Gates Foundation kind of looking next? What are some upcoming things that you really see as either sectors or different types of public-private partnerships that you guys are really looking forward to over the next couple of years?
We're looking forward to making sure that our existing investments work first. I mean, to be honest, these volume guarantees are 5 to 6 year agreements. We're in years 2 of them, and it's a partnership. It's a long, we're starting it. We have expectations and hopes for success beyond we reduce the price. I mean, we are hoping to make sure it's sustainable. We want and this is kind of like working on some of the challenges, which is making sure that the NGOs and the donor governments understand the types of costs and the risks they're creating and continue to improve those so that we can keep the lower prices a sustainable model. So I think one aspect really is making sure that these continue to work and work well. I think in terms of other areas, this is a very, like I said, a very basic tool that's been used for a long time in the private sector. But it's very new and novel in global health. So we've started applying it to vaccines. We've done it in family planning. I think our hope is to see, are there other commodities or other areas that would benefit from this type of instrument? And not just within global health, but within the other areas that the foundation focuses on, for example, agriculture and livestock. So I think we're exploring potential other areas, but the foundation will never have enough money to guarantee every investment for
as much as
a procurement. And so I think we would like to try to expand this and make this kind of tool available to more aid agencies or more foundations, and to see how just not the Gates Foundation can work on this.
Right, and all the more reason then why you want to see how well the models do, because then it's sort of the proof of concept that you can then share as a best practice with other aid organizations.
Yeah.
So Rick, to you, where are you guys looking next in terms of the development of your public-private partnerships?
Doors open. You're all invited. I think we're looking to obviously continue to expand, and I think as was pointed out, and just using the example of the work we did with Gates around helping to lift small-scale farmers, one of the things we'd love to do is to help develop a private sector platform to buy from these farmers so they graduate from selling to us. There's some of that happening in Honduras. Walmart is now, it was interesting, our country director in Honduras said, oh my God, I lost all these farmers who were selling to us. And it's like, well, declare success. They're now selling to Walmart. They don't need you. And so I think the big picture goal is how do we create the economic opportunity so a large segment of those in hunger don't need to be in that position anymore. So I think that's one area we're looking. We've actually talked to Cargill. Would you be willing to participate in buying food from these small-scale farmers? But I think the door is wide open. We're interested in creative ideas. And to the point about data, I mean, that's part of what steers what we all do. And we're very fortunate in that we do have a pretty robust data collection effort, but we're even talking to Google now. They manage data. Are there things that we can do together? So our doors are wide open across the board.
Efron, so in terms of, obviously you've mentioned that you've been working in the developing countries and that perhaps that's oftentimes easier for you. Are you continuing to look for opportunities in the developed world as well, or are you thinking that at this point more on the developing world?
Well, I guess both. But we see an enormous demand today, actually in the developed country. We're actually entering now the U.S. and some of the more developed countries in South America and even Europe on these kind of projects. I think the number one issue today in the world is there's plenty of resources. You just need to use them in an efficient way. In the developed countries, you have the facilities. You just need to upgrade them and make them more efficient. In the developing countries, you don't have them. So you need to build them to begin with as an efficient structure. I think what we're looking but towards the future is to create more of these examples of financial and business structures that collaborate with government, with public sectors. And just as a last remark, a short example, we are engaged in the Bahamas for another water project, reducing water loss from 50% to 25%. At the stage that they structured the bid, they didn't structure it in the more innovative level that we thought that we can bring to the table. Mm-hmm. We worked quietly and with a lot of dignity to their position, that you can embrace whatever you want to embrace, but you just listen to the way you can do it a bit more sophisticated. With a lot of technology that we can bring to the table. We created this structure and financial structure that actually the Interdevelopment American Bank got engaged in financing that financial structure for this water project. That they're now actually the one that are promoting this structure for projects all around the Caribbean and other places in the world. I think if you build it right, and if we see more of institutional funds going directly, taking the ability to cover themselves and taking some fiduciary responsibility for the money they manage, but actually understanding that they're managing funds of people, and they can use these funds to help other people if they work directly. That's the missing link today, I think, on everything we see. And then you have the whole circle of business and profitability and everybody winning from that accomplished. But we're the world is going towards that direction. Right. We just slowly need to push it a bit further. Thank you.
Exactly. We only have a few more minutes left. I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for questions. So if there are any questions from the audience. Yes.
Yeah, it's probably a question more for Steve. Obviously, an organisation like Chevron and the Gates Foundation have big lights on them in terms of people coming to you, looking for funding. But one of the challenges that I probably get my head around is how does a corporation that's committed to making a difference find a strategic partner that's actually that's actually in the game of creating sustainable difference, or actually bringing an end to an issue or a problem. Kerry's done a lot of strategic work in getting the data and actually going out to the marketplace and saying, and it's easy it would be relatively easy to identify from that perspective who are the business partners in the TB vaccination space. But if you're in the vaccination space, you may not automatically find Kerry. So that kind of the alternative way. And I was just wondering what you'd learnt from that, and how you find those strategic partners.
Well, I would say I've been very fortunate that we haven't had many of our strategic partnerships that have not gone well and have not delivered. I think I alluded to it earlier that a lot of it is just doing your homework up front, and I think in our process, which is imperfect, that there might be partners that we did not evaluate. You know, we might have been only exposed to ones that are high profile, have lots of experience, but that's what we were looking for, right? And to Caitlin's question about, you know, how do you work with your partners on the metrics? You know, we establish, once we identify these partners, and again, there may be somebody that we overlooked, and then we identify the metrics, and if it doesn't, you know, pan out, then we part ways amicably, or else we develop a long-term relationship. So we've been with the Global Fund since 2008, and we have over $60 million invested in Global Fund. Now, how did we, you know, we didn't just stumble upon them, they were very high profile, right? And so I think that's an example of how we approached our efforts into global health, right? For education, as I mentioned, Project Lead the Way was one of the leaders in the space we were interested in supporting, right? Does that help?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to be a little controversial here. I think, as you know, I think one of the things too is we need to break the perverse incentives. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in our sector that we need to be thinking outside the box and solving these problems, right? So Chevron probably can do a better job at solving a lot of the problems in the world than many nonprofits can do, given their business objectives. And we need to let that happen. And I think there's a lot of perverse incentives in our industry, which is self-sustaining. Like, we want to basically live forever and don't want to kill ourselves off. And really, we should be in the business of putting ourselves out of business. And I think that the more that we can give the private sector a role in solving these problems, the better. And reduce our own need for this social sector, right? Which is should be shrinking and reducing as we go forward. I mean, that's how I feel.
Sorry if I just ask a point. So I completely agree and understand that view, but I suppose what I'm looking at is the NGO sector or the public sector has become very effective in the last 20 years at strategic solutions, actually looking outside the box and understanding and crunching the data. And I suppose from myself, I'm not involved in a company like Chevron, which has got a huge spotlight on it, but when you're in an organisation that's down to that next layer, there's a lot of white noise in the NGO space. You know, and there's a lot of different models, a lot of them are ineffective. And I suppose the question I'm asking for is, when you're in that situation, what is the way that you cut through it? How do you actually get to, is there a methodology, or is it just simply trawling the white noise?
It is trolling. I mean, my perspective is, yes, it's some trolling, but we need to do a better job of killing ourselves off. Right? There's just too many of us out there. I'm not saying in my particular business, I think we do have a critical niche that we have a real purpose in that. But when I look across the sector, generally, I think that the Chevrons of the world and others are better suited to solve some of these really difficult problems. And killing off the perverse incentives that we have. And, I look at Dadaab refugee camp on the border of Somalia and Kenya, and I think that shouldn't exist, right? I mean,
But I think that's the value of the public-private partnership then, is to try to figure out who's best equipped to handle which part of these great challenges, and build off from there. So we're actually out of time, unfortunately. Yes.
Sorry, can
Go ahead.
I just have to add one thing that I feel is very important. Last week at a conference in DC, I had 2 occasions where I was approached by NGOs who took the opportunity to give me constructive criticism about our partners, and they were competing partners. So I think that's becoming an issue.
It wasn't Bono, right?
No. But it was, it's becoming an issue where this is almost like becoming, a business shark environment, right? And the last thing that we want to hear is somebody who's in the same space as one of our partners coming up and telling us how bad this partner is. And I think that's how
The
that's.
bad side of the market, yeah.
Yeah.
The bad side of creating more
So-
hybrid models of
So we get
nonprofit.
enough of that on the business side.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, please join me in thanking the panelists today. Thank you all for
Thank you.
coming.